What do high-functioning female bosses know that you need to know? Have you got that flexible 80-hour work week that often happens with being the boss? It may no longer be an 8 to 5 for somebody else, but if you've shifted to more hours of the day, your work kind of spilling over into your personal life, you definitely want this episode. I'm Deborah Atkinson. You're listening to She Means Fitness Business. It's sponsored and hosted by Voice for Fitness, the overarching umbrella of everything we do here. And at Voice for Fitness, we believe that you want to be an inspirational example to midlife women. And in order to do that, you need a profitable health and fitness business. And the problem is a lack of clients or a lack of revenue. You're not charging enough, which makes you feel uncertain and shakes up your confidence about whether you can really succeed. I believe you deserve consistent, dependable revenue from clients that you love working with. And I understand how this feels where you are because I've been there too. It's why I now train fitness pros internationally. Here's how I do it. First, you book a call. We jump on a call, and number 2, we create a plan of action based on where you're at and want to go. Number 3, we celebrate your growth, all the baby steps that you take along the way, including that end zone. So you book a call, and in the meantime, get your business scorecard. It's designed for health and fitness professionals to tell you exactly where you are right now. Just do the self-assessment and it will lead you to what you need to do next. So you can stop feeling like your dream is slipping away while other less qualified and less heart-centered coaches make sales and they get more clients. And instead, you can increase your revenue by at least $5,000 a month in the next 90 days. My guest today is Dr. Laura DeCesaris. What a fun name. She's a functional medicine practitioner specializing in women's health and high performance. Laura works with driven, ambitious women, helping them to rebuild their metabolism so they can experience optimal brain health, body composition, and natural vitality. She takes a female-centric approach to health and wellness, teaching women about their bodies and brains so they can make better decisions for their health and leverage their biochemistry for optimal performance. You can find her contributions in outlets like Forbes, NBC News, Great List, Parade, Well and Good, and a lot of other publications. Laura is based out of Scottsdale, Arizona. She works with clients virtually around the world. In this episode of High Functioning Female Entrepreneurs, we really only touched on women's cycles and how to work with them, not against them. We're not even talking exercise here, talking really about your work schedule. I want to know if this episode is valuable for you. Tell me in the comments and we'll do a deeper dive. Let's dive into this and introduce you to Dr. Laura. Dr. Laura, thank you so much for being here.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. I've been looking so forward to this and spending time with you.
You know, this group of, I'm going to say primarily women, and guys, you know, if you're here and you're lurking in the shadows, you can just be quiet, stay in the corner, and we don't want you to go away. But this has become primarily female fitness and health coaches who are actually training their meta of themselves. And that is the whole truth. And they're the best people to do it. But this audience is so, and I can stand at the front of the line, so capable, let's say that, capable of putting in more and more hours, more and more time in order to serve better and better other people. And we are literally needing to give our own selves the advice that's coming out of our mouths. So I'm so glad that you're here to kind of pour back in to these people who are pouring into so many other people. So first of all, how did you get started doing this? You know, really addressing how do you be a highly functional entrepreneur and, have a better performance doing whatever it is that is, whether you're an athlete or an entrepreneur? Where'd that come from?
It's so interesting, when you mentioned this audience, how we all are serving former versions of ourselves. So my journey into this really did come just from that. I have always been what people like to call a bit of an overachiever. I don't particularly like that word too much, but I've been that way my whole life. And when I started dealing with my own health issues in my 20s, had a diagnosis of Hashimoto's followed by a diagnosis of lupus. And I just had no interest in slowing down, in not going after my goals. And for me, finding the entrepreneurial world was kind of a breath of fresh air, not just mentally, but also for my health, for finding that sense of quote unquote work life balance that we all crave. Like, yes, I'm sure a lot of us can end up being being in this place where we're like, wow, I became an entrepreneur to like make my own schedule and I'm working a lot now. But also at the same time, being able to have this freedom and flexibility in how we work and understanding how to align that with our body, with our health goals can be very freeing for a lot of us, but it's not taught to us. We grow up kind of in these conventional models of working 8 to 5s or 9 to 5s, and then it's all of a sudden working 100-hour weeks to create your own business and starting to learn how to, okay, how do I navigate working more hours when I'm in the building phase until I'm getting to the point where I can scale a company? How do I navigate that without burning out, without creating more health issues, without feeling tired and cranky and everything else all of the time? For me, what I found was I had to kind of like, when you're at a restaurant and the waiter brings over a hot plate and they're like, don't touch that hot plate. Well, how many of you here like have to touch it? You're like, I got to see how hot that plate was. My experience was I had to touch the plate. I had to see like, what is that threshold for myself? How far can I push it? And of course, experienced burnout. I have this theory that most high achieving women are going to hit burnout once in their life, whether they want to or not, just by figuring out what their limits are. But I learned so much in that process that I kind of decided, of course, I don't want to do that again. And if I'm going to be creating my own business, if I'm going to be in this entrepreneurial world, I want to do it in a way that is meeting my needs, that's allowing me to show up as the highest version of myself, and is letting me perform at this level where I feel clear and capable and just really excited to show up and, go to work every day. So my own health journey is very closely intertwined in that. And really what I saw in becoming more of this entrepreneurial world was all of these other women creating really incredible businesses and products and ways to serve others at the expense of their health,
Hmm.
because no
Amen.
one was showing them how to do that until there was a problem.
Yeah. So true. I love that. Okay. So, here's what we want. We want to be more productive and we want to be more efficient. And I feel like those are almost, maybe for our brains, on opposite ends of the continuum. Like we may have resistance to the fact we can be productive and efficient.
Yeah, and
Like,
I think there's some unlearning there, because
mm,
I think a lot of us have grown up thinking that being productive is being busy. And
yeah.
those are two very different things.
Yeah.
You can have, a very productive work day where you're only working a few hours a day. And that's kind of efficiency, right? Like
Yeah.
how can I do everything I need to do in a couple hours today?
Okay,
But
hold on. I want to unpack this. This is so meta for
right?
everybody who's here, who's working with women in menopause. This is exactly what we're breaking this down into, telling them how to exercise, right? So they think that doing more, putting in more time, more cardio, more strength, or just they finally get it that it's high intensity and low intensity, but not moderate exercise, doing the right thing. But they think, okay, this is the solution. I'm going to do that more times, more days, longer, and or all of the above. we are telling them that about their exercise. This is exactly what we need to come back to when it comes to, say, the work prescription as opposed to exercise prescription. So I love that. And yeah, we're definitely raised by that population, that era of parents. I certainly am, because I had older parents, and my mom was not only older, I was the very tail end of her baby booming years. And then she married my dad, who was 10 years older. It was all about work hard, get rewards, work hard, get rewards. So the other piece of this is not just about knowing the right thing to do, but it's not feeling guilty. Being able to say, I was productive. That means I don't have to fill the time the rest of my day. I could actually enjoy it.
Yes, it's like completely retraining our brains on how we perceive, self-worth as it's related to our work. And I know I've definitely felt that way before, especially when I first started out. I would be like, okay, I worked for 2 hours today. I got all these things done, but I can't stop working yet because there's this whole day left. I have
Mm-hmm.
to do more. And then I started asking myself, well, do you? Because
Mm-hmm.
you crossed those big three things off. You really moved the needle forward today. Maybe now it's time to just go take care of me and like
Mm-hmm.
enjoy this little thing called life, kind of practice what I preach to my clients.
So good. There's another place where this shows up, and I feel like almost, I don't know if you're Catholic, but you might be a priest right now, and I might be confessing. So, um,
Mhm.
but this is in hiring people to work for me. I'm actually able to get to the point where I'm having conversations that are much more mature, knowing that they too, I want to be hiring people on my team who value similar things like freedom, flexibility, because I want them to be creative. I want them, when they're not working, when they might be on a hike, to have a great idea, thinking, I should bring that up in a meeting. This would be potentially great for us. And maybe it will, maybe it won't. But I want them thinking like that about the business too. Yet I find I still want to come back and say, well, tell me, like, what hours did you work last week? Like, what did you how much time did you put in on this and that? And I have to play that game with other people too. And it tells me I'm not done with doing the work personally, because it's showing up outwardly.
Yeah, such a good growth moment for you because that's so true, right? Like
Darn it. Yeah.
a lot of us turn into this coaching entrepreneurial model because we don't want to trade our time for money. Yet,
Hmm.
as we start to look at, like you said, scaling into teams, are we asking that of the people that we're bringing into our company? If we really want this aligned company, how do we find those, magical unicorns out there like us who just have a passion for this sort of business? And yes, of course, there's always going to need to be some direction with work tasks, things like that. But they're doing it in a way where they're getting everything they need to work done. They're also allowing that space for their own health, mental well-being, creativity. I mean, I don't know about you, but scheduling open blocks in my schedule. I know that sounds a little like an
Hmm.
oxymoron, but just blocking out time where I literally put on my calendar creative work.
Hmm.
And I just see what happens that day. Maybe I have it, maybe I don't have it, and I need to just go like go on a long hike, something like that. But allowing myself that time versus overscheduling myself with busy tasks has been a huge game changer for how I can show up in my business. And of course, we want that for anyone we're bringing on our team as well.
I love that. And I'm very similar. So I get up in the morning, and that's my creative time. So I kind of set boundaries for myself without knowing I was doing it. But I don't, before it became sexy and popular, I don't open up my email until, 9 or 10. And I don't pick up my phone first thing unless, of course, there is a reason I'm waiting for some fire alarm to go off. But I find too, it's like nobody has access to my schedule. Like, they can't schedule me until noon, and sometimes things have to change. But I find that if I don't have that time, I'm no good the rest of the day. Like, I can't come together and programs can't happen and there's no fix, there's no articles, there's no content and it comes and filters right down to you and who you can be. I want to talk a little bit about the brain chemistry that's related to like who you can be and how you can show up, that we could leverage chemicals, like feel good chemicals. You mentioned hiking. We should probably hike together because I think you're here in Arizona too. But and then maybe not, because maybe our creative time each is better spent independently and individually. But that is something for everyone to know. So the dopamine, the serotonin, those things that offset our cortisol levels, how could we leverage those in order to get what we really want to move our business forward, but also to keep the freedom and the financial freedom that we want?
Sure. I love that more and more people are talking about brain neurotransmitters, the importance of dopamine and serotonin, all the connections from brain to gut. I see so much more of it on social media now, which I think is really great, because as much as we are these incredible higher beings capable of unique thoughts and everything else, like we also have these really primal wiring systems in our body where imbalances or not enough of these brain chemicals can seriously affect how we show up every day. Like, doesn't feel like you have any reason to just be in a terrible mood, and really it's your biochemistry just like not on the same page with you that day. So when we start peeling back the layers of, okay, well, how do I optimize these things? How do I really make sure I have healthy serotonin and dopamine and, adrenaline if I need it, that sort of thing? Well, it's not as simple as just like Googling what's a dopamine supplement, let me take it. Let's look at how we structure our day, how we structure our goal setting processes. Are we doing things that the physical body needs to make that? Meaning supporting our gut health, getting all of the micronutrients, the vitamins and minerals we need to make something like dopamine? Are we taking care of our good gut bacteria? Are we moving our body? So a lot of it, again, comes back to these things that we're teaching our clients in terms of their health, but they're also impacting literally the messengers that tell us how we feel. So I think a good place to start is always routines or lack thereof for any of these. You mentioned earlier, you always have this space where you're not jumping on your phone, you're not diving into your email first thing. I don't do that either, because I do think that when that happens, it just sets our brain chemistry up for not having a successful day, depending on, what is in that inbox, what is on that social media feed. And really, everyone talks about dopamine as like the goal setting neurotransmitter. And it's not necessarily the reward part of it, it's the motivation part. So we know when we have healthy dopamine levels, it is easier for us to continue to work towards a goal because we have that motivation. So there's some people out there that will even say, like, don't actually tell other people what goal you're working on, that you've hit the goal, because that kind of tells your body that like it doesn't need to continue making dopamine, versus you working kind of not working in silence, but at the same time, like keeping some of those things to yourself and just like telling yourself, this is me working towards my goal. It sounds so silly that just one sentence can actually impact your brain neurochemistry, but it can. You literally telling yourself and training yourself to think, this action that I'm taking right now, this is helping me achieve this goal. That can create dopamine in your body and help you stay more motivated to continue doing it.
So, in
So
a sense, this is like placebo effect, almost like manifesting it. Yes?
yeah,
Yeah.
I was going to say that, and I was like, is that too woo woo to bring up that thing?
We're all about woo woo. You just bring it. You do. I
Yeah,
think
people think manifesting is like, oh, I'm just going to say this and it'll happen. Well, no, it's actually thinking about it happening, and that actually does start to create the brain chemistry to keep you motivated to take those action steps, to continue to do that work to help you achieve that goal that you were trying to manifest in the first place.
well, yeah, and I would like to flip that on its, you know what, for a minute and ask anybody out there, have you ever done this? You've said to yourself, I'm never going to get this. And you're not hitting that goal. Huh. how well's that working out for you, right? So you might as well change the thinking to the other side. And you may not be there yet, but you're working toward it. And yeah, the power of that is, so it's either you change that in a second without any effort, sweat, or any money invested in it, but it can change everything for you.
Absolutely. And, I think about when we're coaching clients on their fitness goals, that's such a huge part of coaching, right? People start to get discouraged. They don't feel like they're making progress enough. What do we say? We tell them, hey, any movement's better than no movement. We say, hey, you showed up today, like you're working towards your goal. And that always makes them feel better. And it's some of these underlying brain chemistry circuits that is supporting versus saying, yeah, you didn't show up. You're never going to hit your goals unless you show up. Like that's not an effective coaching method. But, encouraging people to take any step towards that goal, that's what helps drive these messengers of motivation.
That is so, so intriguing. And I have to tell you, that is not at all what I might have guessed you might have said in answer to that question. But I'm so glad that we had you embellish on it, because stress, as we all know, for the ladies that we may be serving who are dealing with cortisol related um, exercise intolerance, adrenal stress, they're depositing belly fat because of the combination of cortisol and insulin, and potentially the mismanaged exercise prescription that they're doing. But then we turn right back around, and cortisol that we're creating for ourselves in just telling ourselves too much, too many times, like, I'm not where she is. I'm behind. I, you know, am just nowhere. I have no list. I have no nothing. We keep, embellishing and telling those, amplifying those kinds of messages, causing the cortisol. So, such an easy way to shift it. And, I thought you were going to go for the exercise, like the hiking, being able to do that, which it can, of course. But this shift is just, you can do this while you're sitting at your desk.
Yeah, and it's some of both, right? Like
Yeah.
realistically, for body composition changes, like we know we need to get the right kind of programming in. Like we know
Mhm.
they need the weights, we know they need the nutrition, but there's also benefits of choosing little bits of movement when you can versus not doing it all because you can't fit the perfect workout in.
Right.
I think for a lot of high achieving women, it's that all or nothing mentality. Well, if I can't do it all in, I'm not going to do it at all. And it's
Yeah.
starting to change our perception of things to no, that's actually not a helpful way to look at this. It's actually the little steps that help you stay motivated towards the bigger steps. And especially in that population you're talking about where we're stressed, we got blood sugar things, throw into that mix if we're in perimenopause, menopause, and estrogen is starting to drop. Well, now we get into the connections between estrogen and dopamine and serotonin. So it's like all of these complex layers of an onion that we have to consider when we're really helping people effectively reach their goals.
Yeah, so true. And back to, just for many of our Flipping 50 menopause fitness specialists, you already know this, but for those who are still struggling, maybe with some clients who, won't do anything because they can't do the whole thing, they won't do 15 or 20 minutes because they can't do an hour. So they think it's not worth it. Still, I often will say, and this was entirely my story, how Flipping 50 has come to be is because I discovered this accidentally and then looked at, is there any science behind this? Is this just me, or is this a real thing? And the fact is, those busy women who, think it's not worth it unless they do an hour, they would be saving themselves. Their busy schedule is saving them from themselves, because doing that hour would actually throw them under the bus. Doing the 20 minutes will actually get them more fit with less stress. It's, yeah, it's life kind of gives you what you want and need at the time if you're paying attention. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a great point. And it's, as we think about it's such a complex interplay between the brain chemistry and the thoughts that can drive it, right? Because
Yeah.
we're talking about this. Of course, it's making sense. I'm sure people are having light bulbs go off like, oh, yeah, life is trying to save them from overdoing it.
Yeah.
I just had a conversation with a friend this morning who's in the health and wellness industry. And, she's sending me her cortisol results. They're all over the place. And she's like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I'm doing this. I'm like, wait a minute, back up. You just said exactly what can,
Yes.
like, we can overdo the good things, and that can be just as problematic
Hmm.
as having some of the not so great things in our lifestyle.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Infamous. I've had that happen too. And in fact, I think the woman that I tried to generously respond to slammed the phone down on me.
Okay.
She said over and over, she said, I don't understand it. I'm barely eating. I'm walking 4 miles a day. I drink coffee till noon. I can't lose any weight. And I said, well, you're barely eating. You're walking 4 miles a day and you're drinking coffee till noon. And then let me explain how I didn't get the chance. I was gone before we even got any further. So very true. Okay, I want to make sure we tap into this because with your expertise, then there are so many biohacking tools out there. What are your favorites, and how could our entrepreneur listeners tap into those and leverage them?
Yeah, I do love the biohacking field. I find a lot of women are curious about it, but haven't jumped in yet because right now, it is a very male-driven field. There's more and more women joining it, but a lot of the info that's out there has been created and designed for men. We're lacking research on women.
Mm,
We're not considering our hormones, our changing physiology as women within this lens of biohacking. So I always feel like I need to preface this conversation with that before we jump into tools, is that if you're a woman who wants to start utilizing these biohacking tools, I want you to look at them and consider them also based on your unique hormone situation. Meaning, do you have a menstrual cycle? If so, you kind of want to map them to those changes. If you're perimenopausal, menopausal, you kind of want to map it to your profile there and kind of consider what your unique, weak points versus strong points are at each hormonal phase of a woman's life, because that is very different than men. And we have to consider,
mhm,
how do we actually get the benefits of these in alignment with our physiology? So
mm.
that's my little biohacking disclaimer. But my favorite tools right now, I like to categorize them based on the end goal. So I think going into biohacking with an intention is really important versus
Mm,
just doing them because you think they're good for you.
mhm,
So there's biohacks that are more of a long game that build resilience. And then there's biohacks that are more of a short term, how do I help support stress management, cortisol hormones in the moment? So, my favorite for resilience, I love temperature based biohacks. Like, I think cold plunge, sauna use, contrast therapies, most people can find access to those things now. And there's really just so many benefits long term for mitochondrial health, for improving that resilience over time, and handling how your body perceives stress. So, especially if you're someone who feels like you get stressed out really easily, jumping in a cold plunge tomorrow is not going to fix that. But if over time you start incorporating that into your routine, 6 months, a year, 18 months from now, you may be a completely different person in how you perceive and handle stress. And that's kind of the beauty of bringing things like biohacking into your routines. You have that power inside of your body, inside of your cells. The biohacking tools just help you elevate it so it becomes your normal day to day experience. So I do like temperature regulation a lot. Um, I'm also, in terms of like investment level biohacks, I've been a really big fan. I'm in my mid 30s right now of PEMF, pulsed electromagnetic. I find for me that's been one of the absolute best things at really helping me optimize my sleep, keep my nervous system nice and regulated. And it's something I can do every day. So for me, that's become one of my favorites, regardless of like where I'm at in my cycle. I can use it. I can benefit from it. I just think it's really cool as more and more research comes out in terms of what it does to balance those different arms of our nervous system, to help reduce cortisol, to help us get into that deep sleep more. So those are my favorites at the moment.
Very cool.
Yeah. And then of course, in terms of like immediate focus, I do like anything that helps like elevate brain performance, liquid ketones, nootropics, maybe a little microdosing. I think those fields are really, really fascinating, just to kind of tap into those deeper layers of creativity and flow states.
Awesome. Love that. Okay, so you got to tell me, how often do you cold plunge?
So I started doing this before it got really popular on Huberman Lab podcasts. I don't know if you
Mhm.
listen to this. He has like incredible protocols for all of that. And his big thing was like, you can get max benefits in like, I think it's like 10 or 11 minutes a week. Like you don't need to be doing this super long term every day. I've 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 only really done it in the kind of first half of my cycle. So like that follicular phase leading into ovulation, like I don't do it before I get my period. I find I'm already prone to more stress, and a cold plunge for me there does not give me the beneficial effects. It definitely stresses my body out more. So I'll typically do like 10 minutes per week in the first half of my cycle, and I'll usually split that into like 3 or 4 days. So that's kind of just my own N of one experiment with how I feel like I get the best results in terms of mental clarity, in terms of resilience. Um, Based on being a woman, I'd be so curious if more people looked at that data in alignment with women's hormones.
Yeah. Have you run that by or talked with Elisa Vitti about that?
No, but I should. I
Of
talked about it a
Yeah,
little bit with Kayla Osterhoff. I don't know if you know her.
I
Um,
don't.
she she runs a program called her biorhythm, which is all about looking at biohacking through this lens of menstrual cycle changes. But yeah, I would be so curious if there's other women experimenting with using these different tools in different parts of their cycle, and if they notice different impacts.
That's so awesome. And just so that listeners, if we're talking about something that you're like, who the who? So, in an upcoming, and you will be invited right now as we're doing this live, upcoming summit or online event for women's exercise, the what, the when, and the why for women's exercise over 40. I've got nearly 40 speakers coming on to talk specifically about the science of the best brain and bone and muscle health based on science. And Elisa Vitti is the founder of Flow Living. I mean, she's really where it all began, that we started talking about women's cycles, how we will think the best, how we will work the best, the way to be more productive and think of yourself on a 28-day schedule as opposed to a 7-day a week, 365. We do everything the same every single day because our hormones don't work like that. And so she also goes into how to exercise. She is appearing on the summit. We're talking about exercise. If you are still cycling, what's true for you, and if you're not, there are things for you to tune into too. But just so that we're not talking behind your back and you all know who are we talking about. So I love that. Awesome. And I love that you broke down really and give us the code and the protocol for what you're using personally. Love that. Let's talk about one terrible topic. And of course, we're getting to where we usually call it a day. But if you have the time, I'd love to talk about this one because it's so eminent. Burnout. I mean, and I think the burnout happens in two ways. And I've talked about this for a long time. It can happen whether you're being successful or not because of that guilt, that feeling I have to work more and more and more hours, whether I'm successful or not, because of just it's become a safety and security thing. As you mentioned, if we haven't unlearned that piece, it's going to happen. Why is it still so prevalent? Is there more to it than what I've just described? And how can we change that pattern, no matter what it is?
Yes, I love that you pointed out there's these kind of two levels of it, because I do see that all the time. There's kind of this burnout that we see people. I see a lot of women like exiting that typical corporate schedule of just 8 to 5s, just totally
Mhm.
being at the beck and call of someone else.
Mhm.
That's burnout. And then in the entrepreneurial world, It's the working all the time, having the financial stress of starting, and
Mm-hmm.
then that other layer of from outside in, they're very successful, they're scaling, but they're still doing those same habits, that same self-talk. They're still not really setting that time aside to pour into themselves, regardless of their quote unquote level of success in business. A lot of times, actually, as people start to scale their businesses and become more successful, it brings on a whole host of new stressors and pressure to show up in a different way. A lot of the times people get more in the public eye, things like that, and it just adds another layer. So I usually look at this in terms of one, the biochemistry, and two, the mental game around it. I think the second one is really relevant because it does come back to that conversation we had about unlearning what is productivity? What is efficiency? How much do I need to be working? Am I setting boundaries, not just with other people, but with myself? Like, something I do with my workouts is they go into my calendar just like client appointments. And I remember talking to one of my clients about this, and she's like, I could do that. I could schedule my workouts just in my client schedule so no one books there. I'm like, yes, of course you should. Like that is your time for you. You need to do that. We became entrepreneurs for this reason. So we would
Mm-hmm.
have the time to take care of ourselves while showing up to serve others. All of that stuff, of course, is impacting our biochemistry in addition to everything else in the world, right? So, for better or worse, like our world is kind of a toxic place in terms of just environmental, food supply, everything else. So, I also just think it's a different ball game in terms of what self care really looks like. I always have a conversation with clients about the difference between self care and self indulgence. So when we talk about like mani pedis and things like that, those are great. And like we all mentally totally love and need those, but those are self indulgent acts, which is not a bad thing. True self care is sometimes the not so fun and easy stuff. It's making detox and drainage support part of your daily routine. It's doing the mental work, the inner work, it's being real and honest with yourself about things like boundary setting, about relationships, about self love. So,
Mm-hmm.
really, it's self care can impact your biochemistry in these other ways, but we also have to be real with ourselves about what that nourishing self care actually looks like. I think until that happens, we're going to continue to see people burning out because they're still repeating the same patterns in terms of what they put into their body, how they care for themselves, and how they're defining what their workday needs to look like in terms of success, in terms of productivity, and everything else like that.
Yeah, I really love that you've kind of mentioned all of those pieces. And I think that it's so easy to say, like the manicure and the pedicure, I'm gonna take a personal day or take a day off and call those like those are my self-care. But it really is that's a superficial look at, what are your limiting beliefs? And so much of the time we can't see those for yourself. You can't see the picture when you're in the frame,
Yes.
and you need the coach, you need someone else to say, do you see what you did there? How's that thinking working for you? And you won't see it because that's your norm. That's just your perception of that's how everybody might think is what you could perceive. I know that you probably heard this 10 years ago, but it's like if you really want personal growth, start a business, right? Because you can't fake it. Like you start getting into it, and would you get in deeper as you begin hiring a team, you will unravel and shed layer after layer, and it does get easier. What I love about being an entrepreneur for the women who are listening, probably over 35. Many of you are over 45 and between 45 and 70 still thinking I'm starting or I want to start. Maybe you're not even started yet. You have time. 30 or 40 years is plenty of time to start and launch a business and scale it, grow it, whatever your definition of success is. But I think it's, we can ask questions. We're not afraid anymore to not have all the answers. That's such a place of freedom. Laura, I would love for you to, capitalize that, summarize that in your own words, and then let's let everybody know where they can track you down to get some more support.
Yeah, I feel like when anyone starts a business, they should get a little letter in the mail that says, like, congratulations, you thought you wanted to run a business, but this is actually a personal development journey in disguise. This is what you're going to get.
Right.
But yeah, the reality of that is, like, coaches need mentors. This is also the power of masterminds and things like that, so that you have other people who are working towards similar things, who get your journey and who can also call you out on your BS when you're not doing the things that you need to do to take care of you, to kind of keep everything moving and flowing the way it needs to be. Like, especially for us women, just to connect this back to our brain chemistry, we create so much oxytocin when we are in supportive groups with each other. It's not just related to our kids. We also make it when we're around other women celebrating each other. So it's like a favor we can do not just to ourselves, but for other women in our life, is making sure we're connecting in these groups with them and celebrating each other, holding each other accountable. It helps all of our brain chemistry. I mean, anyone in here who's ever been to, a mastermind event or out with your girlfriends knows that experience of what it does for your mental health. So yeah, I agree with all you say. I think that's kind of a nice place to wrap it up.
It's just such a great place. I'm going to share a little story behind the scenes. Literally, oh my gosh, you are a priest and I'm confessing. But my phone is right beside me. It always is during a podcast, just in case the guest needs to connect and say, oh, my microphone isn't working or whatever. So, of course, it's right beside me. And it's been beeping and going off nonstop. And one of the attendees, who happens to be a neighbor of my retreat that, as we record, I'm hosting next week, said, oh, you know what? I'm going to dinner with you, but I'm going to have to miss the dinner on Thursday night because I just got a notice that I'm getting an award for breaking like a multi-million-dollar number, by the way, in real estate in Phoenix. And I'm getting an award. She said, I'm so surprised. I'm like, you're so surprised. It's like, we will be celebrating with you Thursday and Friday nights after you get the award. But I totally agree. It's just like, if we can get together and say, look, I mean, this is what you do in your 60s. This is normal, and I think it's so wonderful because we all feel like uplifted. The glass ceiling goes up. It's for all of us. It's not just for one of us.
Yes, absolutely.
Where can listeners chase you down, Dr. Laura?
Yeah, so best places are Instagram. My handle is at dr.laura DeCesaris, or my website, drlauradecesaris.com/her wellness vault. This is my women's entrepreneurial health hub. It's literally the go-to place where I talk about all of these things we've been discussing today. And it is full of female entrepreneurs of all different ages who are just working towards a common goal of crushing their business without sacrificing their own health and mental well-being.
Fantastic. This has been such a enlightening conversation. And I think just kind of opening up something that for many entrepreneurs, maybe who dig right in and focus on, I need to write an email. I need to be better at copywriting. I need better social media. I need, going right to that, but this is the underlying thing that you may not feel at the end of focusing on this, that you were productive, but you will feel very differently uplifted in your business when you can tackle these things. And I thank you so much for being here. Okay, listeners, it's up to you. So was there a question you wish I would have poked or prodded a little bit more for Dr. Laura while I had her here? You can leave your questions and comments at the show notes that you'll find at fitnessmarketingmastery.com/high-functioning female. High-functioning female. And what are you waiting for? The world needs us now more than ever.